On today's show, The Matrix is definitely not a reboot. Indy 5, we're pretty sure, is not going to be a reboot. And we're joined in studio by director of Pacific Rim Uprising, Mr. Steven DeKnight. Movie Talk starts right now. This is very exciting having somebody finally as well dressed as I am here in studio, and that would be the one that
Finally.
Steven DeKnight alongside Jay Washington and Perri Nemiroff. This week has got to be pretty exciting for you. Is this week just crawling along for you as we get to the release of Pacific Rim Uprising on Friday?
It's actually speeding right along. I got to say, it's been a whirlwind.
You've been going all over the world advertising this movie. You're telling us just before we went live that you've been to Australia. You're going to be going to Tokyo right after this.
Yeah.
Is it nice to be back here for a little bit, back in the States?
It is. It's nice to be back in the States briefly before they ship me off again on the PR tour.
Well, you're just so relaxed, and I can understand why people enjoy talking to you.
It's the jet lag. It's totally the jet lag.
We have Steven DeKnight here in studio. We're going to be talking all about Pacific Rim Uprising in just a little bit. But first, our top story here today is that The Matrix is getting the new treatment, but it is not a reboot. This, according to the writer Zak Penn, reiterating what he had already said, that this is not going to be a reboot. He promises it's just another story in the Matrix universe. He was asked about this when he was doing the press rounds for Ready Player One, which he also helped write and adapt that screenplay. He was quoted as saying that I've been working on The Matrix right now, which is in a phase right now. That's a franchise I desperately want to see brought back, and I can't go into too much detail, but I've been harassing Warner Brothers for years to try to get it going again. So that's one thing I'm working on, and I've been working on a bunch of other things too. Steven DeKnight, I'm so happy to have you in studio to talk about stuff like this with. The Matrix has so many stories that you can tell in that world, so does it make sense to you that we're actually just doing another story as opposed to rebooting the Neo one that we already saw?
Oh, absolutely. It's a vast universe, and Zak Penn's the guy to do it. I worked with Zak in the Transformers think tank, and that guy, I have never seen an idea machine like that. It's just one after the other. He was just a superstar in there.
You get into that Transformers think tank because there was a writer's room that was assembled to kind of get some new ideas about Transformers out there. Is it a competitive situation when you're sitting in there with a bunch of great idea guys and everybody's watching Zak Penn like, this guy's really making us look bad?
Oh, sure it is. And he absolutely made everybody look bad. He was amazing, and I was so thankful to have him there. I sucked, quite frankly. I was like, I was a little slow getting the Transformers. I missed that sweet spot of the cartoon and the toys. I think I was in college when that started. So, yeah, I'm dating myself. But Zak was amazing. I can't wait to see what he does in the Matrix world.
I mean, it's something that like you hear initially and you're like, wait, no, they're going to touch the Matrix. What's wrong with you? And then you start thinking, well, yeah, it is a pretty big universe, so we could have other stories in here. Right, Jay Washington?
Yeah, absolutely we can. I mean, we've had cartoons, we had different things, but I think this is really Zak Penn just saying, can you all please leave me alone on Twitter? That seems like what this is, because there's constantly going to be Matrix fans who are going to keep coming at you who just think, oh, they reboot everything. So that's automatically what you think. And it was said, I'm not exactly sure, but that this might be a Morpheus, type prequel. So the story of him. So I would say give it a chance till we hear exactly what the plot line of this is before we all start just tweeting them Facebook and making Tumblr pages about what this is.
I have a Pinterest Matrix page you guys can check out. Perri, I think that maybe the smartest thing that he did, and probably the most honest thing that Zak Penn did in this new recent round, is that he said, look, guys, I'm a fan of the Matrix. Like, why would I want to sully something that I'm such a big fan of? He just wants to tell more stories. Is that the way to go?
Exactly. I don't think he has social media to worry about as much as just being on the press circuit right now, which you probably know for a huge wide release where I'm sure the last question of every interview is, so what are you doing next? Let's go through the IMDb in development list and see what information I can get.
Let me go ahead and delete my last question for Steven right here.
That's the reason, though, is because The Matrix it's a classic pretty much, and it's got a huge fan base behind it. And I do think that world is rich enough to continue the franchise. But when you have something something like that and something that is a classic, why would you reboot it when you can come up with new layers and angles to take in other directions? And then there's also the thing. So when I read his quotes, I get the impression that, oh, this is something he's working on, but maybe it's not something I can expect to see anytime soon. But also when I read these quotes, I see a fan, someone who's passionate and someone who's going to keep pushing until this happens the right way.
But it is a fair question, asked, because there's a lot of great properties that we see get the reboot treatment. I don't know. I love the first Vacation. I didn't know that it needed to be rebooted, but then you look at that and you're like, well, that even wasn't a reboot. That was kind of a continuation of it. So the term reboot gets thrown around a lot of times when we're talking about properties that we already know, but necessarily aren't sure which way the sequel or another story in that universe is going. The question I have now is if it's not a reboot, so these characters that we fell in love with in the first movie, I'm not going to say the last two movies, we fell in love with those characters. Are we going to get hints of them? Should we get hints of them?
I lean towards a no. I think I tend to do that with every single property that we see expanded, no matter what you want to call it, a sequel, a reboot, prequel, spin-off. I don't even know what other terms there are out there. But I tend to go with keep it in the same universe with the same rules, but give us a different location, a different character. That way you don't wind up in a situation where you're tripping over things that you've set up in the past. I mean, the one example that I keep coming up with is Ghostbusters also, where it's a different movie and a different story, but I don't want to see familiar characters used quite like that because I liked what they were doing all on their own. And then they threw in those familiar elements, and that's where I started to take a step back and say to myself, am I really loving this as much? Rather than just focusing on the new stuff you created, which I was digging.
Yeah, Steven, it would be odd if they just had like Keanu Reeves and Lawrence Fishburne working at a Quiznos, like just for one scene in the new Matrix.
A nice cameo.
I mean, is there some room, or would you be open to the possibility, because it is a great way to sell this new Matrix movie once you see that trailer, if you do get a little hint of something that we already saw, whether it's Keanu Reeves or if it's Hugo Weaving's Agent Smith, something that we can glom onto that says, oh, this is tied in with the first one, but we're not redoing it.
Yeah, it really depends on the context. I think you hit right there with Hugo Weaving as Agent Smith. That's a character the agents could totally carry through the Matrix world without upsetting the apple cart.
Yeah, I think that might be the way to tie this one in. Jamie, is this something that you're excited about? Because like I really was so impressed by the first Matrix, and then my head started to hurt after watching the last two because I'm too stupid to understand what's going on in the Matrix.
It did. The last two reloaded and what it was, Revolutions, completely changed the concept of what you knew in the simplicity, for lack of better words, of the first one. But I'm interested. I was even more interested when I kept hearing that the Wachowskis may not be involved, but then they may be involved. So that made me wonder, how do you do this? How do you take this property they've established and go forward if they're not involved, or even if they are? And if it is a reboot, if it's not? That's why the interest is there so much. I just want to know what's going to happen with it.
I can't remember if it was the blue pill or the red pill, but whatever pill you guys are taking on the Matrix reboot, let us know. Is it the blue one or the red one? I think is it the red one? Yeah, I think it's the red one he takes, and then he goes down. It's a good schmodown question. We're going to move on to our next story, and that is Netflix has a new movie called Triple Frontier that has been shopped around a while, and it looks like Ben Affleck is once again circling this particular movie. I say once again because he was considering it for a while, and then he left the project, and then they had a couple other names, notably Channing Tatum, amongst others, who were talking about considering weighing the role, and now it looks like Ben Affleck is back looking at it, and Oscar Isaac has also joined the production. Triple Frontier refers to an area in South America that is a crime haven, and so five friends get together, they reunite to go down and stop some crime. You know, Steven, I know when I get together with my high school buddies, I just want to go fight some crime. That's what's happening with Triple Frontier. This is a movie that seems like another feather in Netflix's cap, so to speak, where they're cranking out so much original content, and if you get a name like Ben Affleck and Oscar Isaac attached to this, it can really up your stake in the world.
Oh yeah, Netflix is fantastic. I loved working with them on Daredevil. And the thing that you get with Netflix is creative freedom. They give you free reign with very little interference, which is something, especially on the movie side, you just don't get anymore.
Yeah, I mean, if you get so much creative freedom with Netflix, my question to you is, as somebody who's a director and you're working on projects, What's the marketing like with Netflix? Because you see, I mean, I'm seeing Pacific Rim Uprising ads everywhere because it's this big theatrical release, whereas with Netflix, their strategy is very different. You see some social media marketing. I mean, with Cloverfield, we didn't even know that was coming out until I was watching the Super Bowl, and I'm like,
right.
oh, well, I guess I'm not watching This Is Us anymore after the game. Now I got a Cloverfield movie to watch. Is it frustrating in one regard, having a movie that you put your blood, sweat, and tears into, and then not knowing that it's going to be able to get out to the public in the same way that a theatrical release would?
I imagine it must be. I mean, one of the reasons that I love movies and I love doing Pacific Rim Uprising is it's out there. It's everywhere. And for a filmmaker, that's a great feeling. Netflix has a bit of a different model. Not that I'm not interested in doing a movie for Netflix. I certainly would. That lure of creative freedom is pretty damn strong. So I think it's a balance. You've got to give up the idea of the traditional publicity machine.
Yeah,
for
I
your
think
movie.
it's something that a lot of filmmakers, that a lot of actors seem to be enjoying as well, Perri. And Ben Affleck could be the latest in a long line. I mean, everybody's talking about the Martin Scorsese movie, The Irishman, that's going to be landing at Netflix. Triple Frontier. Where does this one land as far as the prestige factor for Netflix?
Oh boy, it's tough to predict this far out, definitely with an ensemble like that. And there's more people attached. It's Oscar Isaac, Ben Affleck, and then there's some others that they listed that was also a pretty impressive
You got your Charlie
lineup.
Hunnam,
Yes.
Garrett Hedlund's
There you
in
go.
it. Pedro Pascal's
I
in
hope
it.
I can tell the difference between the two of them. Isn't Charlie Hunnam and Garrett Hedlund two people that everybody confuses?
Garrett Hedlund was great in the Tron movie.
And you know what Charlie Hunnam was great
in?
in?
A little movie called Pacific
There
Rim.
you go. There you go.
Nice transition.
Should have been my walk-off. Yeah, damn it, I should have saved it for the transition.
I think what makes me most excited for this project, and especially you bringing up creative freedom at Netflix, is J.C. Chandler, the director, because I just remember what happened with him on Deepwater Horizon, and I love how that movie turned out. I really do dig that movie, but I think things didn't work out for him on that because of creative differences. I heard something about it being his take being too political. So I'm excited to see, what would this be, his All Is Lost follow-up at a place like Netflix where he can do whatever he wants, I would assume, pretty much, between Margin Call, All Is Lost, and A Most Violent Year. A Most Violent Year is one of
Love
the
that
most
movie.
underrated movies.
Fantastic.
I still can't believe how most people did not pay attention to that movie, and the award circuit that year did not at all either. And I was shocked. So ever since then, especially, I've been looking forward to seeing what he gets to do next, and hopefully this is the right matchup for him with everybody involved.
Yeah, and he gets to reteam with Oscar Isaac again. Jay Washington. So this movie, with Chandler doing it, he's rewriting the script that was originally written by the Herlocker screenwriter. This seems like a gritty crime drama. Why is it the right play for Netflix?
Netflix is expanding their horizons. You see everything they're doing, from the cartoons to the Marvel adaptations to even Bright in the fantasy realm. So why not have something that goes different, crime, gritty dramas? You're showing you can encompass all of this while bringing in new viewers. Again, sci-fi, Cloverfield Paradox. No one knew about this film till an hour before it dropped. So you take films, you give people the warning, you put that urge and you put that taste in their mouth. We're doing crime drama now. You're like, oh, well, Netflix has reign to do certain things that no other network or even studios will do. So now you get that, and you want to see what Netflix brings to that. So you get this with the Ben Affleck, with the Charlie Hunnam, with an Oscar Isaac. Then you're like, okay, well, give us more with different type of ensemble all-star cast.
It goes back to something that Steven hit on, where you, as fans, as a consumer, you want to know how your projects are doing, how something that you saw is doing with the rest of the world. And it's just harder to do that with Netflix, because Netflix doesn't release their numbers. They're famous for not letting you know how something did, if it did great, if it did poorly. You can read the tea leaves if something gets a sequel or not, but with a movie like War Machine, I have no idea how that did. No clue. I have no idea how Bright did. With something like this, if I see it and I like it, I want to know, did other people see that? We're never going to know. With something like a theatrical release movie, we can look at the box office receipts. Like, I know Black Panther's doing very well right now.
Right.
I wouldn't have known if it was a Netflix
But
movie.
I think they let us know this time with Bright. They let us know how many people streamed Bright, because it was saying, hey, we got Will Smith here. we got Joel Edgerton. Let you know how many millions of people watch this. Of course, they're not going to do it with everything, but in these high-profile film situations, they'll let you know, of course.
Well, it's also the confusion of when they release a certain number of people that watched it, then, I'm obsessed with box office, and I can't compute exactly what that number of views means for Netflix. So really, they spent X amount of dollars on this movie. How much did they really wind up making in return with some new subscribers versus a whole bunch of people sitting in a room watching on one person's account? So it's just very confusing. I feel like the day is coming when I don't know if they could be forced to release that kind of data or just some service comes up that actually can dig into that kind of stuff. But I'm very, very curious to learn more about it.
I love how you assume that it's just a bunch of people in one room watching on one account, as opposed to me maybe borrowing my neighbor's password, and they may not be aware that I'm
borrowing it from Mark.
It's a loaner password. It'll be fine. Steven, I'm just curious as to where your brain goes when you're just relaxing. When you're done with all the press rounds and you put on the Netflix, are you looking more for an original content in the form of a show, something you can binge watch, or are you looking for that movie that you're like, oh, this is an original thing by Netflix, I'm curious to invest 2 hours of my life in this? I
do a little bit of both, honestly. I check out ongoing series. I check out the movies. I do a deep dive. I'm currently halfway through watching all the episodes of The Office. So that's the great thing about Netflix. You can go on there, and it's such a vast, vast catalog. No matter what you're in the mood for, you can find. I sound like I'm doing a commercial for Netflix, my friends at Netflix. But it really is amazing. And the thing about them doing movies that I find fascinating is that most people don't know it, but when you do a movie, especially a big movie, you spend as much in advertising as you spend on the movie. That's basically the formula, which is a massive amount of money. Netflix doesn't have to do that. Which is a huge bonus for them. And I assume they're still making quite a bit of money over there. They seem to be doing very, very, very well. And I think for filmmakers, it's also a bit of relief not to have to worry about the box office. Because, I feel it right now. We're about to release Pacific Rim Uprising, and it's all about what's the box office going to be? What's the opening weekend? Netflix, it doesn't matter.
Well, Netflix, it certainly doesn't matter. With Pacific Rim Uprising, you're in I think, an enviable position as being the movie that's going to dethrone Black Panther from being at the top of the box office.
Here's hoping.
Black Panther did $27 million this past week, and Pacific Rim Uprising, I dare say, is going to do more than that domestically, but the globalization of movies is the first question I really want to ask you as we get into Pacific Rim Uprising, which is in theaters this weekend. It seems like it's just recently that there's been this trend that studios say that, hey, we can make money with one movie all around the world, and we don't necessarily have to just aim it to American audiences. Pacific Rim, certainly in that category. You have giant robots fighting giant monsters. That is something that can be enjoyed and digested by everybody. Is that a conscious thought process on the director's part, that I want to make sure this movie's palatable for a global audience as opposed to just here in the States?
Oh, absolutely. And I was very fortunate because of what Guillermo del Toro and Travis Beacham set up in the first movie. It was a global fighting force. So it was very easy to just expand that. It's in the DNA of Pacific Rim. So I didn't have to go reaching or straining to add, Chinese characters or Korean characters, South America, all over the globe. I wanted that, and that's one of the things I loved about the first movie, that message. These days, movies like this are so gigantically expensive with the effects, the locations. Everything's just more expensive these days. You have to hit a global audience to keep franchises like this alive. They cannot survive purely on domestic box office.
What about the story on this one? Because one of the things that impressed me most was, when you hear about a sequel coming out, you could picture what the likely trajectory of it is. But this did some things that I was very pleasantly surprised by. So is there any, without spoiling anything, of course, is there anything that you would attribute like breaking story to in this story?
Oh, sure. Well, first of all, when I was hired on, I put my thinking cap on, the writer's hat, and I came up with like a 5 to 8 page general outline of where I would take the story. I talked to Guillermo about it. He had some great suggestions. Legendary really liked it. And then I took a page from TV, where I come from, and I put together a writer's room for 2 weeks, half TV writers, half feature writers. And we argued and threatened each other. And
You said, what would
yes.
Zak Penn do in this
What?
situation?
Zach was not available, bastard. And really, I approach this as Guillermo. To me, I've been a huge fan since Kronos. I've seen all of his movies at the theaters. I have all of his DVD. I've listened to all the commentaries. I have all the books on the making of his movies. I've just been a rabid Guillermo del Toro fan. I think he's the Leonardo da Vinci of movie making. And what I didn't want to do is try to imitate him. There's no way you can imitate Guillermo. So he gave me permission to take the franchise in a direction that I wanted. And I'm a kid of the late 70s, mid 80s. So for me, it's Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Goonies, E.T., a lot of Spielberg in there. So I really wanted this to feel almost like a callback to those movies that I loved as a kid. Just fun, action-filled with some heart. So that's really how we approached it. I wrote up this giant manifesto to Legendary saying, this is what I think this movie should be. And the two main things were it had to be fun and it had to be 2 hours or under. Because I don't mind a 2.5 hour movie, but I think the subject matter really has to support staying around that long. And I'd rather have the audience come out saying, man, I wish that was just 10 minutes longer than, boy, those last 30 minutes were tough.
Jay, you'd be a great comic. He knows. You leave them wanting more.
I was going to say, does that come from your TV background? Because we see a lot of shows, especially binging series, where that you feel they have 1 or 2 episodes too many. So do you feel like that is what helped you to decide, hey, under 2 hours when you came for the running time? Absolutely.
It also just comes from movies that I love. I mean, back in the day, your movies were 2 hours or under. And it just felt right. It had a 3-act structure, and it was 2 hours or under. I'm old-fashioned that way. Not to say I will never make a 3-hour movie. I might. Matrix, But really, you got to feel each movie is different. Each movie should be as long as it needs to be. And this one just felt right, being a little tighter, a little faster. It allowed the humor to hit better. It allowed the emotional scenes not to drag things down. And, you just got to feel for the sweet spot.
It's pretty ambitious for a director who's helming a project like this. I mean, this is such a bigger project from a directorial standpoint than you've ever had the pleasure of working on.
A little bit.
For you to come in and say, hey, I know, I'm really excited to be here. We got robots fighting monsters. Got to be under 2 hours. Then you direct all this stuff. Were you pretty sure as to where it was going to land as far as the running time? Or did you get in the editing room and you're like, boy, we shot a lot of stuff that we can't use?
Oh, we shot a lot of stuff. And that's just the process. I would, on the directing side, I would rather shoot too much than not enough. Because if you shoot too much, you can trim it down. If you didn't shoot enough, you got to go back, and it's very, very expensive to get everything back together and do reshoots or pickups. So I always like to shoot a lot of footage, as much as they will allow me. And then when you're in editing, you can start to trim down, and that's what I like to do. It's kind of like when I write a script, it's usually 10 to 20 pages too long in TV. And then you just start whittling it down and really kicking the tires and seeing what you absolutely need.
What is the biggest thing that you learned as a director on this set? Because you can prepare, you can do all the training, you can read all the manuals, you can take all the classes, and then at some point you find yourself on set calling action. You're the director of this movie. What was the biggest surprise that you didn't see coming?
Well, 2 things. Comfortable shoes. And that may sound funny, but it's, I'll tell you, you are, as a director, you are on your feet the entire day. It's never a break. And you have to be flexible. I was working with the director back in my Angel days, who was giving me some advice. I was about to direct my first episode ever of anything. And he said, look, be prepared. Know everything you want to shoot, and then also be prepared to throw it out the window when you get on set, there's a problem, and you lose 2 hours, and suddenly your big crane shot becomes sticking the camera in one position and having people move around really fast. So you have to be, especially in a movie like this that's so large and so complicated, you just have to be nimble and not stuck into one viewpoint. And you have to be open to other people's, it's a collaboration. So John Boyega, Scott Eastwood, my DP, the amazing Dan Mendel, all of these people throw in great suggestions, and you just got to be able to take the good ones and try to ignore the other ones, and work as fast as possible.
Yeah, I mean, they say never meet your heroes, and John Boyega is who I want to be when I grow up. And
Me
when
too.
you see him in a movie like Force Awakens or Last Jedi, he pops off the screen, and he's one of these people that, as far back as Attack the Block, you say, this kid could be a star. What sort of ideas did he bring to the character that he plays in Pacific Rim Uprising?
Well, so much. I mean, he wanted him to be not a classic hero. He wanted him to be a little more roguish in the beginning. Not a bad guy, but definitely on the outside of the law. And I remember sitting down with him, and we both love giant monster movies and mechs and anime and sci-fi. And he said, look, I love playing Finn, but I don't want to be Finn in this movie. I want to be exactly the opposite of Finn. And I fully support that. I love Finn too, but I think that's a great choice. And I remember he showed up in Australia. It was about like 2 weeks before shooting. And he had this line cut in his haircut and like a scruffy mustache and chin whiskers. And we had never talked about that. And my first reaction was, what the hell is that? There's no way to fill in that line in your head now. But he said, no, I really think this is Jake. Trust me, this is Jake. And I was very dubious, but it was really too late to do anything. So we started shooting, and he was absolutely right. I mean, that's so part of his character. And what I love about John, as an actor, he, if you ever seen him in an interview, he's charming and fun and funny. That's him. It's not an act. That was him 24/7, no matter how long the days were, no matter how hot it was. Those suits were terrible, but he was always in good spirits and good humor. And he lights up the screen in this. I think people are going to be, even people that already love him, are going to be surprised by this movie because he just glows in this movie. He is amazing. And on the producer side, since he is a producer on this movie, he was so involved, especially in the action scenes. My visual effects supervisor and I pitched him the big finale of the movie, and he really liked it, but he thought it could be better. So we built this big tabletop map of Tokyo, and John came over, and for 2 days we played with toys and just figured, what if it did this? What if he jumped over here? And it was fantastic, and it really shows in the sequence.
That's a good day of work.
That's very good.
I want to hog all the questions here, so I want to have my panelists each maybe get one more question before we have to say goodbye.
I have a question for you. Are you going to come in tomorrow with a line shaved in the side of your head
That's what
now?
I'm hoping.
It's totally
And some
possible.
scruffy facial hair.
I had a different haircut yesterday on the show. A lot of people commented on it. I could go back to bangs. I could go side. I could go high top.
That's my
bangs.
look. That's
Do
my
locks.
look.
Do dreadlocks for me personally.
You never know what I'm going to bust out. This might be the last head of hair I ever have, so I'm going to get the most
I
out
do
of it.
want to ask, you bring up John Boyega's personality with Scott Eastwood and the rest of the cast. How much fun was it working in those environments, in those situations where normally we know film days, for those who've been on sets, 12, 16 hours normally, but sometimes goes longer. And again, cramped situations, suits. How was the energy consistently going every single day for weeks and months?
It was great. We shot something called French Hours, which I had never done. French Hours is, instead of a 12-hour day, you shoot a 10-hour day, but you don't break for lunch. They bring food, and you just keep working.
Okay.
Oh, I thought maybe it would involve like wine, like
Yeah,
3 hours.
wine, some cheese. And I had never worked that way before, and now I'm ruined. Because the great thing is, usually when you work long days, you take a lunch break, you come back. It takes a few hours to get the momentum back up. This way, you're just running and gunning the whole day, which was really fantastic. And, despite some very tough conditions, we shot a lot of the tarmac and Shatterdome in Olympic Park in Sydney, which, like it's like a parking lot in the summer of Australia. So it was like a frying pan out there. But everybody was having such a great time, and we all loved the subject matter so much. The energy never really dipped. Mine did occasionally, but theirs
Because
were
of course
great.
you're the director, so that's
Speaking of the subject matter, I'm just like fascinated by the various designs of the Jaegers. So are there any designs you didn't get to use in the movie, or any kind of weaponry that you came up with that just didn't fit these particular ones that are highlighted here?
Yeah, there were a lot of. We did an art book, so some of them are in there. ILM did all of our early Jaeger designs, and they did a fantastic job. And there was some mixing and matching going on there. There's a few that didn't quite make it, but really the cream of the crop ended up on screen.
My last question for you, and this is the one that everybody wants to know: does Steven DeKnight wear the vest when he's on set directing?
This is no. I have a directing uniform, which is everybody that I worked with saw this for about a year, which is jeans and a black T-shirt. Comfort is number one when you're directing.
You've
Yeah.
got enough on your mind. I feel
Yeah.
like the last thing in the world you want to do is actually think about what you have to wear getting up in the
So
morning.
did you have a suitcase full of just blue jeans and black T-shirts?
I did indeed, my friend. I did indeed. Before I started directing this, I bought a bunch of new blue jeans and 20 black T-shirts. And that was it.
That's how you do it, especially when you got to work French hours. French hours, 10 hours straight through. As soon as we're done here, I'm going to go take a French nap. I want to thank director Steven DeKnight. Pacific Rim Uprising is in theaters this
Thank you.
Friday. We are going to continue on with Movie Talk, but once again, thank you so much for joining us. Best of luck with the movie, and we'll come back and see you here real soon. You're always welcome in our dojo.
Thank you very much. I'm going to hang around here all the time now.
Our next story is coming from the world of Disney, and that is THR reporting that Lego Ninjago director Charlie Bean has closed the deal to helm the live-action CG adaptation, get ready for it, kids, of the Disney classic Lady and the Tramp. You knew it happened sometime. It's going down. It's going to be made exclusively for the Disney streaming service. That's the wrinkle in this. It's a Lady and the Tramp live-action reboot, just like Disney has been doing, but this one is going to be exclusively for the new Disney live streaming service that is going to be available in 2019. Speaking of blue jeans and a black T-shirt, Kristian Harloff is now stepping in for Steven DeKnight. A lot of big shoes to fill, and I think we gave you a pretty good story to kick off with, pal.
You know, I had it. I was like, you know what? Now I'm going to open up. I'm going to go, I'm representing Steven DeKnight, but you stole it again, you son of a rat. No, absolutely. I'm glad Steven was able to represent me on his shooting. As far as Lady and the Tramp goes, it's funny because it's the marketing smarts of Disney. This just came out on Blu-ray, or it's about to, because I have a copy of it. My daughter just watched it, loved it, by the way. We've been waiting. It hadn't been available for like the longest time.
Yeah.
You couldn't find it. And I got home and I was pissed off because, not pissed off, but I had a 6-year-old. The fact that she was watching it without me. And I got home, I'm like, well, what'd you think? She's like, I love it. And she just couldn't take her eyes off of it. But what a smart move when I heard that, when they were doing live action, I was like, okay, it's just another one of their classic movies they're doing this to. But then to launch it on the streaming service, that is smart. That is very smart, because we know we're getting the Star Wars. What else are we going to get? Well, they're telling you now. This is the type of stuff that all audiences will latch on to. And the production's going to be pretty good on this thing. So, and it'll be cute. You know, you get to see what they can do now with the talking dogs. You know that it doesn't look as cheesy as it did back in the day. I'm on board. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, Lady and the Tramp is such a animal-centric story as opposed to something like Peter Rabbit that's got a healthy mix of you have your animals and you have humans. But if you can do anything close to the CG that we saw in Peter Rabbit or something like Paddington, where there's a lot of interaction between a animated bear and live action, it can come off really well. Like Kristian said, Jay, Disney's going to be able to put money into this. My question to you, this being exclusively for the streaming service, does this tell you more about this production or more about how much they're putting into the streaming service that they want everybody to buy into?
I think both, because Disney we'd already heard when Disney was announcing their streaming service, everybody's like, what are they going to put? Like I said, first we hear the live action Star Wars. You're like, oh, okay, they're not playing. Now they're going Beauty and the Beast. Excuse me, that's on my brain. Lady and the Tramp, because I want to see the scene with the spaghetti and the meatball. Yep. But they're taking some of their classics. They're going live CG. Instead of putting them in theaters, we'll bring all that traffic to us directly. And it's a very smart move for both ends. You know, taking your properties that people love and then taking this new platform that people were kind of skeptical on because, yeah, everything is going streaming, but there are so many streaming services. You know, some people are like, well, am I going to pay that for Disney? But it's Disney. You are going to pay that.
And they're going to get you on Star Wars.
They're going to get you on Star Wars
Right,
anyway.
right.
So people are going to pay for it. And you take these things, you bring in all these different generations. It's a smart move all the way around.
Yeah, Perri, is this the right movie to open up your family slate with? Because as Kristian and Jay said, well, you had the Jon Favreau, announcement where he's doing a live-action Star Wars streaming service, which is going to get a lot of people on board. You're getting the kiddies, you're getting the families on board, you're getting those nostalgia ties. Lady and the Tramp, the right play to go? Would you prefer a different Disney movie?
This is not the right play to go. I mean, who wants to watch cute dogs?
The mouth thing. I knew it. I knew it.
I was making a face.
I know it. It's funny. I just can. I can read. I can
Yeah,
read
she does
lies.
that. You can see that.
I can read lies. I'm good at it.
Obviously, I love this. And normally, whenever I heard, live action animated hybrid, I'm like, oh, don't do that. That's a terrible idea. But now we have Paddington. We had Peter Rabbit, which I was very impressed by.
Jungle
And
Book.
Jungle Book too. I have a feeling that this won't look quite like the Jungle Book. I'm attributing it more so to like super family friendly, kid friendly type stuff. So that's kind of what I'm trying to picture
I'm
here.
talking more
but
the technology
yeah,
itself,
yeah.
yeah.
Hopefully this all comes into play because it's been very, very impressive lately. So I think they're going to wind up pulling it off look wise. And really, it's one of the smartest things to do for that streaming service because one, you have fathers like Kristian who love this movie before their kid even gets to see it, then wants to share it with their kid, and then on top of that, they're going to they have the Star Wars show. They're hitting every single demographic, so everyone out there could possibly need a subscription to this streaming service. Really, they're kind of putting their pieces on the board in a very, very smart way right now.
Yeah, so Jay and Kristian, you guys just loan each other your Disney streaming password when the kids want to watch something?
Well, I'm going to call Kristian after we get off of this. I'm like, I'm going to need every DVD you have.
Right.
Just for me. Not even for my 4-year-old.
So
Like, I'm going to need it for me so I can recatch back up on them.
Well, listen, it's very smart. Going back to what we were talking about in Jedi Council this past week, is that people really want to see new things develop in film and TV, but on streaming, because with the television, this is a movie, but when they start to do more series, is that and I said it on Council, I think that there's going to be more investment in Star Wars in the television series than there are even in films. Because look at all the TV series, whether it's Stranger Things or all these. If Stranger Things is a 2-hour movie, doesn't work as well as the 2 seasons of investment that you got in those characters. And I think that's the same thing that Disney's able to do now, whether it be Star Wars or any other properties. And movies like this, they can throw on there if they don't want. So let's not put it on feature film. Now we have the streaming service, and we're benefiting. That's the difference of, say, what streaming is now. It's not like back in the day when Michael Eisner was like, let's make Beauty and the Beast 6 and put it on DVD just so we turn a profit. Like that was lame, and that was a way. Those were money grab type stuff. Like Cinderella 2, 3, 4. Those are horrendous. They're so bad. But that's not going to be the case with this series. They're going to put as much effort into it. Otherwise, it's going to go away.
I was a big fan of Cinderella, the college years. I always liked Michael Eisner because he did the intro for like the TV movie. When I saw Bride of Boogity, it was him doing the intro, and that's why I liked Michael Eisner. Apparently,
Dark times.
not the best business model for Disney going forward, and it's so interesting because in this little bubble that we all live in, we hear about the inner machinations of something first. So we hear Disney's launching a streaming service. We're like, oh, the evil empire, the mouse is at it again. Most people, when they hear about the Disney streaming service for the first time, it's going to be attached to either the Star Wars live action series or it's going to be attached to Lady and the Tramp. They're putting a friendly face on that, and I think that they're just flicking the jab right now. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg as far as what Disney is going to bring to their streaming service in 2019.
Well, yeah, because also, once you get the Star Wars thing out there, they'll be able to then analyze how many subscriptions they have. And once they get more subscriptions and once there's more, then you're going to start making more shows. And there's going to be all these new programs that they have a chance, because of the properties and everything that they bought, they have a chance to really go after Netflix just like that. And that was a smart move to say, this series by Favreau is coming out. It will be on our streaming service, because then people say, okay, then let's see a trailer for it, and then maybe you'll get my cash.
I wonder what kind of advertising we're going to see, just because of what Steven brought up, where you don't have to pay for as much marketing with Netflix. It's just, I wonder if when 2019 comes, let's say Lady and the Tramp was going to be released in theaters, they would have a marketing budget that is just through the roof. I wonder if everything is going to kind of feed off each other, and they're going to be able to advertise all this just by simply advertising the streaming service, and that could make a lot of these things really well worth their money. money.
Don't be surprised if you see Disney advertising their streaming through other streaming platforms. You know, because if I'm not mistaken, they have a stake somewhat in Hulu. You know, so they can start doing little small things here and there, different Marvel projects. You'll see the advertisement happen different places that you don't think. Like Netflix, we see a commercial or two pop up, boom, and then we see all the Netflix stuff. Disney, they can put it everywhere.
If I see that pop up on a streaming service, I'm thinking that Disney's about to acquire said streaming service, because that's one of the things is that if you have a stake in a streaming service, then that might lead you to be a direct competitor, because Netflix might exist on its own, or they might be acquired by a huge company, or they might acquire a huge company. Everybody else is looking at Netflix and saying, we need some muscle to back ourselves up. So I do wonder if Disney would partner up with somebody like that, or allow somebody else to come under their umbrella.
It's WCW versus
WWE, and they are the juggernaut, right? Disney
All
is the
comes
juggernaut.
back to wrestling. When
Damn
we move
right.
on from streaming services to the theater, particularly 1968, that is when Judy Garland had a memorable run for many different reasons in London, and our first image of Renee Zellweger playing the actress in her later performing years has emerged online. It's Judy Garland, directed by Rupert Gold, and the story, like I said, takes place in 1968 when she was doing a run of shows in London, and they were hit or miss. She was dealing with a lot of different things, not the least of which was exhaustion. So I think that the way the movie's going to play out is that it's going to be her reliving some of her memories from her past, as well as trying to pull up this last run of shows, whether she has one more great hit left in her. You see this image, Perri Nemiroff, and you say, I need to see this, or you say, it's not really my cup of tea?
I need to see it. I was home with my family this weekend when this image dropped, and my mom's a huge Judy Garland fan, and the two of us are sitting there looking at that image, and we're like, is that Renee Zellweger? Is it really Renee Zellweger? Do I click on the article, and then like the thumbnail is is showing something else so it doesn't spoil the image? No, that's really her. She's unrecognizable. I'm excited, one, to see Renee Zellweger kind of back to form, because I feel like it's been a little while since we've seen her deliver a really, really good, meaty performance. And this seems to be the right pairing with her skill set. And I really am very intrigued by the idea of them focusing on this period of her life, because that almost immediately tells you what the tone of this movie is going to be. And it'll probably be a tough watch, because this was the end of her life. And I mean, really, just go read the Wikipedia page about Judy Garland's story, and it'll bring tears to your eyes. It is devastating to hear what she went through from step to step all throughout her career, ever since she was a young child. It is awful. So I'm really curious to see how, like, what the tone, how upsetting, but also tapping into the incredible legacy that she left behind and the incredible achievements throughout her career. So I'm curious to see if they wind up flashing back and forth throughout.
I would hope they would, because you have a talent like Renee Zellweger, who was so great in Chicago, that won Best Picture at the Oscars. Her ability to be a young Judy Garland, or a Judy Garland a year before she passes away, I hope that they make the most use possible out of her range, because I don't want to see a movie about Judy Garland slowly losing it and slowly passing away and being so exhausted that she can't perform anymore. That's part of the movie, and that's part of her story, and I get that. I also want this to be partially a celebration of the talent that was Judy Garland.
Look, sign me up for this movie. This is exactly what Perry's talking about. When Renee Zellweger is able to land a role like this is where she shines. She's one of the elite actresses out there. The problem is that she kind of does some movies that are just forgettable, and she'll run into some roles that are forgettable. But you look at, like, Cinderella Man is an underrated performance of her. She's really, really a fantastic actress. And Judy Garland, for the most part, not everybody's going to that Wikipedia page. For most people, they think of Judy Garland, they think
Wizard of
Dorothy.
Oz.
That's what they think. And they think of this kind of pure teenager who was in the wonderful world of Oz. And this is going to shine a different light, because it shows the real life person, and it will show the human side of her. And I think that she is the perfect vessel to do that. And I don't necessarily have to see the pleasant times in her life. I would like to as well. But I think if they're shining, it depends on what the story is, because it also depends, depending on when this movie comes out. Do we know who's directing it?
Yeah, Rupert Gould.
Okay.
He did True Story with Jonah Hill and Franco.
Okay, well, depending on how this movie comes out and when it is released, this could be something that puts Renee Zellweger right back in the Oscar hunt. Now, there's also times where people go for roles like this, and then it winds up, let's put it in January, or it lands in like February or March, and people forget about it. But it has the potential for her to be recognized in full.
Well, they're talking about this possibly even being finished for award season this year.
Yeah, it makes
so
sense.
we
It makes
never,
sense.
we
I think
never
it makes
know.
sense to ramp it up there. And Jay, going back to Kristian's point, where I think that the way that this movie should be structured is if it's like a boxer and it's like their last fight in the ring, where you wonder if they have that haymaker, but you could also flash back to when they were the most dominant force on the
I don't
planet.
even think you have to flash back so much. We're going to get it like the period, the last few months of her life. You show her having fun at some point, but then you show the behind the scenes backstage where she's just drained.
Right.
You know, the
Right.
popping pills. Those you have the blend of both, because this way it brings all those ranges of emotion out. You know, we see her going out there forcing herself to perform, forcing herself to sing, but then going backstage and then just passing out and being told, you got to go back out and do one more. So when we see all of those again, it's like going to the Wikipedia page. You get those emotions.
It's interesting you bring up wrestling because this feels like the wrestler a little bit to me.
Sure.
You know, in a very different way, but also a very
No.
similar dramatic vein.
It's funny you say that because like anytime when I watched her, I've seen the wrestler a few different times, and every time I watched it with either some former stand-up comedians can relate to that, musicians can relate to that, actors can relate to that. It's all the same bubble. It really is. So yeah, that's an absolutely perfect reference because that's what happens. That's what happens in this life, and it's hard to contain it all.
You say stand-up comedians? Can relate
Yeah,
to
you're
that?
miserable.
Yeah. No, I'm happy. I'm happy most of the
I
time.
know you.
I got 8.5 hours sleep last night. I am fresh as I didn't even need iced tea this morning.
Good for
we
you.
have
You got
one more
8?
news story to get to, and that is going to be something you guys can check out in more depth on Collider News. It's the mention that Rian Johnson is currently working on his new trilogy, and that Steven Spielberg has announced the start date for Indiana Jones 5 is going to be next year. That is going to be April of 2019. They're going to start filming that in the United Kingdom. So you guys can check out more on these stories, which we really don't have all that much to report. They're still figuring the details out for the Star Wars trilogy. We don't know what it's about. And Indy 5, that's a movie, is going to be shooting next year. Check out Collider News for all the latest on those stories and more. Later on today, we are going to have a brand new Schmodown drop. Big match today.
Oh yeah, it's the debut of the Shire Wolves, Clark Wolf and Rachel Cushing going up against Tom Dagnino and Ken Knapsack. Everybody, once they were paired up, oh my God, Wolf and Cushing, are they going to be the next big thing? Jay Washington's very excited about that. That is a team that he couldn't put together, but they did it on themselves with Emma Fyffe, and now it's going to go down.
And we also have a new Heroes that went up yesterday, hosted by John Schnepp. And check us out on Instagram right now at Collider Video. And you can leave a caption for any one of the images we post, and you might be mentioned on our brand new show that will be back up again this Thursday called Caption This. So make sure y'all check that out. We are going to do one live Twitter question here today. Before we get to that, I did want to go back to the Rian Johnson Star Wars trilogy just for a second because I want to close with Kristian. Jay and Perri, do you guys have any thoughts as to what you would like to see that trilogy explore? What time period, what part of the galaxy?
No
No,
thoughts.
the
No,
answer is
I have thoughts. I want it. Obviously, they've said it's not attached to the original trilogy or these new characters that we've seen in 7, 8, and 9.
No
but
broom kids.
What I want is something with brand new characters in a completely different territory. I'm very into Wild Space, the Unknown Regions, and how who knows what's there? You could build a whole new civilization from the ground up in one of those regions. Why not take a major leap out of what we already know and love and try something new, especially with Rian Johnson's creative sense? That seems like the perfect place for him to play.
Jay, what do you got for us?
I really didn't want to say anything because there's so many people that, as Kristian, we've talked about, people are still divided because of The Last Jedi. And I agree completely with Perri. Go somewhere, don't attach it to anything we know already. Let it be its own trilogy, its own entity. It does. You can have the Force. You can have, but you don't need everything people we know already. You don't need to hear about Vaders and this, that, and the third. Have something different.
You look
Okay.
like you're shooting lasers in this direction right
Yeah,
now.
Kristian, you have a tent permanently set up right outside of Skywalker Ranch. What do you know? What are you hearing? What's this movie going to be about?
The exact opposite. I agree with Perri. I think it should be the Unknown Regions. But here's what Rian Johnson needs to do because Jay is right. There's a super divide. It's got to be completely different than The Last Jedi. Also, I'm talking about as far as tone.
Yeah.
Make Looper in the Star Wars world. Make Looper. Make not the story itself, but the tone, the feel. Get away from the hey, is Hux there? Oh no, lightsaber over the thing. Get rid of those jokes. Get them out of there. Do your Star Wars trilogy, and that's how you get Star Wars fans back on, because there's going to be a divide that's going to, I don't want to see it, and then someone's going to come back and go, dude, it's so different than The Last Jedi. It is straight. It's what he did with Looper. It's got a mixture of brick in there. It's crazy. Like, it's a different Star Wars, but it's a little bit more serious. There's a couple of jokes in there, but I like Marvel humor. I like when Marvel humor, because they've cemented it. That's what happens that's how it happens in the movie, and you're used to it. Marvel humor doesn't necessarily work in Star Wars. Even if the jokes kind of hit, they feel out of place. Get rid of that and do what you do best and get all the fans back on board. And I think it can happen. Right now, it's people like, I don't want to see Rian Johnson do trilogy, and I get it. But if he makes a movie like Looper in Star Wars, you'd see it.
Yeah, I think it might be there's a silver lining to all of the divide that The Last Jedi was, and that is for artists out there like Rian Johnson or Jon Favreau or anybody who's working on a Star Wars movie, just make your movie. Make your movie. You can listen to fans, you can listen to producers, you can have a lot of insight. Make the movie that you want to make, because there's a chance you release it regardless of how many people put their 2 cents in. You make a movie that's not going to please everybody. It's very hard to please everybody. I thought Star Wars was always going to be the one to do it. Not the case anymore. Maybe Infinity War and the Marvel movies are the last bastion of movies that please most audiences, but make your movie, do what you want to do with it. We have one Twitter question, then we'll call it a day, and our Twitter question today comes from Karen Kiersgaard, who says, I watched Thor Ragnarok with Taika Waititi's commentary recently. It's the funniest commentary I've ever listened to, and the best since the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Are there any other great movie commentaries that you can recommend for all the fans out there? I am saying right now, you're not allowed to say any of the Collider commentaries.
No, I wasn't going to say that, but I was going to say I don't care. I want to watch the Taika one, because I didn't even think about that. When that dude came in here, he is honestly one of the funniest individuals I have ever met in my life, because he doesn't have... Is he always on? Yeah, but that's him. That's just him. It's like he's just so naturally funny and quick, and being able to just have a conversation with that guy, it's like he'll say something and you're just on the floor. So that's what I want to see. I would also, I think it was Inception. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure as far as the commentaries go. I have to think about it, but I do want to watch the Thor now.
All right, you guys have any movie commentaries that you?
I now want to see the Thor one.
Right.
Yeah, the Thor one sounds great, and I wanna watch and listen to that one. And then I wonder if he's done it for any of his other films, like Hunt for the Wilder People or What We Do in the Shadows, because I'm sure those would be just as amusing. Right now, I'm very into watching documentaries, though, because on Mailbag, Riley brought up the Spielberg documentary, which I still haven't had the time to watch at the time, and
HBO?
I finally watched it. Yeah, wow,
Yeah.
that is incredible. I love watching things like that where I hear details about filmmakers that I thought I knew so well, and you hear these other stories, really personal stories that you could wind up connecting to. And I also watched the De Palma one, which is really something else, and it goes through his filmography so thoroughly. And again, so many different anecdotes that I kind of didn't see coming, and they're incredible stories.
You want 2 great documentaries, check out the Spielberg documentary on HBO, because it is fantastic, and the one that I believe is on Showtime about Eric Clapton's life, 12 Bars. Fantastic exploration of everything that guy's brought to the table. And if you want a good commentary, watch any episode ever of Mystery Science Theater 3000. That is my advice to you. I want to thank our incredible panel, Kristian Harloff, Jay Washington, and Perri Nemiroff, and last but certainly not least, Mr. Steven DeKnight, the director of Pacific Rim Uprising. The movie is out in theaters this Friday in a lot of markets around the world, as well as here in the United States. That does it for us here on Collider Movie Talk. I am merely Mark Ellis at Mark Ellis Live. We'll see you guys tomorrow for a brand new episode. Hey everybody, Mark Ellis here. Thanks for watching this episode of Collider Movie Talk. You want to watch more? Then click up here, or you can click right here for more great content from Collider. And if you haven't subscribed to Collider Video, do so right now and share this vid with your friends. Thanks for watching.